Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming this evening. I want to thank you for being here tonight. I know that most of you have put in a full day of work, but I think what we're going to discuss tonight is extremely important. It deals with the future of the Ysleta Independent School District, a school district that has been in existence for 100 years. As a matter of fact, this year we're starting to celebrate our centennial, and for 100 years this school district, in my opinion, has been the flagship school district of the Ysleta Independent School of the El Paso area. Tonight, before we get started, I'd like to introduce some special guests. With us this evening is City Rep, Miss Lili Limon. Welcome, ma'am. Also with us this evening, trustee from the Hanks Learning Community, Mr. Paul Pearson. And finally, someone who needs no introduction, someone who you're all likely very familiar with, grew up here, went to school here, taught here, activities director here, Trustee Debbie Lewis. Thank you, ma'am. It's hard to follow the Saltatrix, but this is pretty close. I was drawn to the work because as the former superintendent of the Socorro Independent School District, I was aware of how special the Ysleta Independent School District was. But I was also aware of the fact that given their circumstances, that they had, for a period of time, struggled with enrollment. Everyone's familiar with the 2 decades of a pattern we refer to as decline in enrollment. So since 1988, this school district has lost students every year for 25 years. The exception is 2 years, that's 2009 and 2010, two anomalies. In 1988, this school district had approximately 50,638 students. Today it has 42,326 students. It has almost lost 9,000 students. To put that in perspective, that means that tomorrow we could close 9 elementary schools, 4 middle schools, and 1 high school, and we could still accommodate every student in the Ysleta Independent School District. We could accommodate them at 80%. If we wanted to fill our schools to 100%, we would need 34 schools, not the current 63 schools. But if we want to fill them at 80%, which is an industry standard, we're talking about 46 schools, not 63 schools. It's impossible to be that aggressive. What we're about to talk tonight is nowhere near a plan to eliminate 14 schools. But another way of looking at it would be that on any given day, at any given time, 1 out of every 3 classrooms in this school district is either being heated, cooled, it's certainly being lighted and insured, and there isn't a student in it. It means that for every school that we operate, and if we have 14 that we currently operate that can be defined as grossly underutilized, we spend $1 million. So we spend $15 million, more or less, every year to operate schools that one could argue are unnecessary. We're organized by feeder patterns, 7 feeder patterns, and it's part of who the Ysleta Independent School District. In our case, we happen to have 7 trustees. Each of the trustees represent one of each of these 7 feeder patterns. We call them learning communities because we like to think that there's vertical alignment, that for that 100-year period, a student could go through that vertical alignment, graduate from the Ysleta Independent School District, receive a high school diploma, and that at least in this school district, that high school diploma all but guaranteed admittance to colleges, universities, and for about 80 of those 100 years, it also guaranteed a job that could likely result in a living wage, not just for the student, but for the student and their future family. I say 80 years because for the last 20 years, that is likely not true. Our work has changed, the needs of our students have changed, the world has changed, and so for the last 20 years, we have all been focused on not helping students simply achieve a high school diploma, but preparing them for what we call college and/or career, because the world that is about to welcome today's students is very different than the world that welcomed you and I. And today's high school diploma, we call that a baccalaureate degree. Today, a student, in almost every case, should have a baccalaureate degree to guarantee that he and his future family have a living wage. And so what we're going to talk about tonight is not about saving money. That isn't the primary goal. That isn't the motive or the incentive for having the kind of conversation I'd like to have with you tonight. It's important, and we should always be good stewards of our taxpayers' money. But what we're talking about tonight is the reinvention, the resurrection, the rebirth of a school district that has served this community for 100 years. And in those 100 years, I suggest that our students have made an impact and have influenced what happens not just in El Paso, but in Texas, and we even have students that have made an impact on the national level. This district has been a big part of the El Paso community, and I'm convinced it can continue to be a big influence in this community for the next 100 years. But we are at a crossroad, we are at a crucible, I believe, in the proud and rich history of this school district, where the time has come to think about how we can reinvest in the school district in a manner that will provide our students with the kind of environment, the kind of climate that they and their teachers need, so that the kind of teaching and learning that happens in our classrooms prepares students for the global economy that they're about to engage in. And that's what tonight is about. But to have that conversation, we have to first embrace and accept our realities. I just shared some of those realities with you. One of them is that we probably spend $15, $16 million more a year than we should. What is also true, though, is that the schools belong to the community. If this community decides that it can continue to support a program, a district, that spends $15 million to continue and operate schools that are empty, then that's exactly what we will do. But I think that there are other options. I think there are other options for how we invest our money, because one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is the current state of our facilities. And part of the reason the facilities have, over time, deteriorated to the point where we now have to have these candid, unvarnished, direct conversations about what needs to happen in this district is because this district has done everything it possibly can to take any and every available dime and invest it in kids. And as such, sometimes the facilities had to take a back seat. Now what's true is that the facilities are an important element in making sure that students have the kind of environment they need, so it's time to address those facilities. So the Board of Trustees did what should be done, and that is the first thing they asked is, if our enrollment is currently at 42,300 students and we've lost 8,000, 9,000 students over the last 10 years, what can we expect over the next 10 years? Will we continue to decline in enrollment, or will there be an event or a series of events that will increase student enrollment in the Ysleta Independent School District? The answer to the latter is no. The school district will never see 50,000, 200, 300 students again. The good news is it will likely never see any less than 40,000 students. So according to the Templeton Group, a demographic consulting group, this school district for the next 10 years will likely look a lot like it looks today. It will vary, 100 students, 200 students some years, but for the most part, they predict that in 2024, the district will have 42,500 students. Now keep in mind, of those 42,500 students, 6,000 of them don't live in our school district. 4,000 come to us from the Socorro Independent School District, and the other 2,500 come to us from the El Paso Independent School District, Canutillo, Clint, and other surrounding school districts. Why? Because we've earned a reputation of guaranteeing the best public school experience in the city of El Paso. And parents and grandparents who have had the benefit of their children experiencing that in this school district insist on continuing to have their family in the Ysleta Independent School District. And keep in mind, it's not easy to do. When you drive in from El Paso or you drive in from Socorro, you likely pass up quite a few brand new, shiny, modern steel and glass structures that we simply don't have in this district. But what keeps them coming back is a testament to the person in the four corners of the classroom. That is the quality of the teacher that we provide students in this school district, because we invest in teachers. We invest in the adults. We believe that the only way kids can get better is if we support and prepare and train our teachers to get better. So we invest in that. And so subsequently, this year, in 2014, as an example of the work that we do in this school district, no one had a higher pass rate on the end-of-course exams in the Ysleta Independent School District, not in one subject area, but in every single subject area. The Ysleta Independent School District outperformed other school districts. So what we're talking about is really not about the reclamation of monies that could be spent in a different way. What we're going to talk about tonight is we're going to talk about how we can initiate the renaissance of this school district. And what it will take is money, an investment from all of us, and we'll talk about that at the end. But let's look at some examples of how we're going to address the problem that is different than the way it's typically been addressed. What we're looking at is an inner-city urban school district, and we're about there, is that what you typically have in Detroit and Chicago and Los Angeles and New York is you have some of the same elements that we currently have. The community's getting older. They remain in their houses. Their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren go to our schools. They graduate. They go into colleges, universities. They get jobs. They come back to the neighborhood, and there are no homes. There simply isn't the housing inventory at present to accommodate all of the families that would like to come back and have their children experience what they experienced. So the natural thing to do is to look for the three things that parents look for when deciding where to live: affordable housing, health care, and great schools. We simply don't have the housing inventory and haven't had that housing inventory for some time. And so it has resulted in the growth that you see in Canutillo and the growth that you see in the Northeast and the growth that you see in Socorro. And that will continue to happen. But as students leave, and as hard as it may be for them to leave, revenue leaves with the student. And if enough of that happens, and you're receiving $8,000, $9,000 per student, which by the way is generous, then you have to start being thoughtful and deliberate about the programs you can keep and the programs that you may have to eliminate. And if you make poor decisions and you eliminate the wrong programs, then that will result in more parents deciding that maybe going out to Socorro and Canutillo isn't a bad idea, because when you're in a district that is experiencing accelerated growth, your revenue increases every year, and so you've got more programs and more ideas than you can shake a stick at. But as more parents leave, what you ultimately find yourself in is what we call the death spiral. Detroit has experienced it, other large urban city school districts have experienced it, and ultimately the only people that remain in your school district are those people who couldn't afford to leave. And that's a very different demographic with its own list of challenges. I still think we're at a time in this school district where we can change the trajectory of this school district, where we can reinvest in the school district and keep the students we have, and more importantly, attract the students we wish we had. And to do that means an investment, not simply closing, consolidating, and repurposing schools so that we can recapture money and reinvest it in some other way, while we continue to allow schools that can accommodate 1,000 students operate with 300 students. And we have 4 of those. So let's start with, just for illustrative purposes, the Bel Air feeder pattern. The Jacobs report indicates that it would take $16 million to address all of the current needs at Bel Air High School, and those needs that we should either anticipate or are imminent over the next 4 years. So it covers a 5-year period. And I need to say that clearly, because when we start talking about the dollars up on the board that we need to invest in our schools, we have to keep in mind that what we're talking about is a 5-year period. What that means is that in year 6, you could have to reinvest the same $6 million for the next 5 years. And in year 12, you may have to reinvest another $5 million, and basically we're kicking the can down the road and getting nowhere. Because what I mean by that is the kind of investments that we're talking about that are necessary and that we're going to recommend to the board have to happen. They have to happen. But there are no enhancements at present. They improve the environment for students and teachers, but in a small and important way. The analogy I use is, if you take a school, let's use Cadwallader, built in 1921, and we invest money in it, it's a lot like restoring a 1963 Corvette. If you have the resources, you can make that 1963 Corvette look just the way it looked on the showroom floor in 1963. We could do that with Cadwallader. But if you have a 1963 Corvette, restored or not, you still have to roll the windows up and down like this. And there are, I suspect, people in this gym that have never had that experience. The wipers only have one speed. It's on or off. The seats don't get warm, they don't get cool, and more importantly, if you're like me, you'll spend most of your life lost because the 1963 Corvette does not come standard with a GPS unit. So the car is beautiful, but the question is it adequate for today's travel, for today's freeway? And I would argue no. The 2016 Corvette would be more appropriate today. So we can do all of these repairs, and we can make schools beautiful and attractive and clean. And let me stop, because I need to commend the people that are in charge of doing that, because they do an absolutely amazing job of doing that to the extent they can, right? But you can only put so much lipstick on a pig before you realize it's a pig. So we'd like to invest the money in Bel Air High School. We'd like to invest $16 million. We'd like it to have refrigerated air. We'd like to change the roof. We'd like to provide a new ceiling. We'd like to paint the interior, new doors, new hardware, new tile, new rug, new fire alarm system, PA system, electrical, mechanical systems. All of that should be replaced. And you can do that for $16 million. And then we come down in that feeder pattern and we find Hillcrest Middle School and Ranchland Hills Middle School. Ranchland Hills Middle School has 300 and some students. Hillcrest has a little over 400 students. Together they have 800 students. The logic would suggest that we consolidate those two schools. And it would be probably more reasonable to take the students from Ranchland Hills and ask them to attend Hillcrest. But here's what I'm not interested in. I'm not interested in taking a group of students and their family and moving them from one tired, weary school to another old, tired, and weary school. And I'm pretty certain they're not interested in doing that either. What I am interested in doing is taking into account that to address the needs at Hillcrest, I need $6 million. And to address the needs at Ranchland Hills, I need another $5 million. That's $11 million. I think I'd rather take the $11 million and use it as part of payment for building them a brand new Bel Air Middle School that they can both attend and be proud of, and that more importantly provides them with the kind of learning environment that kids need today. I think that those families and those students would be okay with that. And since we have the property off Ranchland Hills and Venado, I'd like to build them a school that looks a lot like Eastwood Middle School. And the thing that I think I'm most excited about is that when you go from a school of 300 plus or a school of 400 plus to 800 plus, all of a sudden your athletic teams can compete. All of a sudden your band is large enough. All of a sudden your choir and all of your co-curricular and extracurricular activities seem to have and be more robust. Right? All of a sudden, there's an identity with the Highlanders at Bel Air High School. And that's what we'd like to do in every situation where we're considering either the closure or consolidation of a school. That is, if at all possible, we'd like to build them a brand new school. It's a starting point. Same thing happens at the elementary schools. They've got a number of elementary schools. The Jacobs report indicates that they have 6 and that they could accommodate every child in that attendance pattern with 4. Let's invest in Loma. Let's invest in Mesa. Sageland has a beautiful program. It's at capacity. But let's take a look at Horizon Heights not Horizon Heights, Hacienda Heights, and Del Norte Heights, and see whether or not, rather than consolidate one into the other, we can't resurrect Bel Air Elementary School. And since we want to be thoughtful with our resources, perhaps we should pursue the idea of combination schools. That's an elementary school, middle school on the same property, sharing common areas with one another, and using economy of scale to significantly reduce the cost of the project while providing two separate and distinct experiences on the same property. Those are the kind of ideas that we've been discussing and that we're considering bringing before the board later this month. Now, the same can be said of, there it is. The same can be said of the Del Valle learning community. Let's invest in Del Valle High School. Let's consolidate Camino Real and Valley View. Let's create Del Valle Middle School, where the current Valley View Middle School is located. The Jacobs report already indicates that Mission Valley cannot continue to operate as a school because of the poor condition it's in. So let's rebuild Mission Valley Elementary School. Let's see whether or not we can convince the folks from Marion Manor, the school that has a little over 300 students that can accommodate 1,000, and see if we can't increase the enrollment at Mission Valley and another combination school. And now we're becoming just as effective as we always were, very efficient, and I don't know that I can be any more transparent with you. That's exactly what I'd like to see happen. That's exactly what I'd like to see happen, and there are a lot of reasons for that, and I just shared some of those with you. But the reason you're here is probably less to do with what's happening at Del Valle and what's happening at Bel Air. It has to do with what's going to happen in the Eastwood learning community. So we'll move through this relatively quick. This is what I've already described to you. It's 25 years of declining enrollment with the exception of 2 years. This is what it looks like, district-wide. Those little schools represent the 17,000 empty seats. This figure right here doesn't include our alternative education schools, where there are more empty seats. So we're at 73% utilization. So 70% of our schools, 70% of our classrooms are being utilized. The other 30% are not. If we reduce it to high schools, I think I've already shared with you, we could theoretically eliminate one high school. That's not going to happen. It's not part of our culture. It's not part of our climate. We're likely to have 7 high schools forever. Middle schools, 4 that we need to look at. I just gave you an example of how we can take 2 of them and eliminate 1 and provide a better experience for students, particularly in middle schools when students are going through some developmental experiences. Elementary schools, 9 of them. Eastwood Learning Community. Let's take a look at where we're at. East Point Elementary School currently has 157 empty seats. That's 15% capacity. Requires about $6.5 million to take care of current needs and needs that are likely that we should anticipate over the next 4 years. Another way of looking at it is a $6.5 million investment to take care of what we need to take care of today and for the next 5 years. Our recommendation to the board will be to make the investment. Eastwood Heights Elementary School, 100%, needs $4 million minimum. Our recommendation to the board will likely be that we invest $4 million in Eastwood Heights. Eastwood Knolls, our K-8 international school. Again, there isn't any room. Oftentimes there's a waiting list. It needs $7.1 million. We'll likely recommend the investment of $7.1 million. Edgemere has a little capacity. Keep in mind that though it says 33% empty, you typically cannot expect a school to get above 80. Whenever a school starts to get above 80% utilization, it's time to start looking at your data to see whether or not you should anticipate the need for an additional school down the road. As long as it stays between 60 and 80, you should feel comfortable that operating that school demonstrates efficacy. And finally, Scottsdale. Now, Scottsdale, for those of you who are from the Scottsdale community, is a dilemma. Scottsdale is that car that you paid off, but that you've decided to run into the ground. That in an effort to avoid a car payment, you drive it year after year after year after year until one day you realize that the car spends more time at the shop than available to you. So Scottsdale, or the conversation around Scottsdale is, do you drop $9 million to address what's needed now and for the next 5 years, knowing that $9 million is almost half of what it would cost to build a brand new Scottsdale? And the answer is no. In this situation, it would make economical sense to build a brand new Scottsdale in the back field, so not to interrupt the students that are currently enrolled at Scottsdale, do multi-story to create enough enter and exit access to the school. When you complete the brand new elementary school, then you go out to McRae, you demolish the existing elementary school, you take it away, and then you introduce play fields and playgrounds and things like that with perimeter fencing that limits access to the school from McRae and from that side of town. And you've not interrupted the children. The children have continued to learn, and they have a brand new, modern elementary school. That will likely be a recommendation to the board. Eastwood Middle School, brand new. Brand new. We got a little room. We're fortunate to have room, and you'll see why in a minute. Eastwood gets nothing. Brand new school. They get our support. Eastwood High School. We're so excited about what we're about to attempt. We're going to recommend to the board that we rebuild Eastwood High School, the entire school. We're going to take the position that investing almost $20 million here just to cover the next 5 years, with a likelihood that we may need to invest another $20 million in year 6, is not economically smart. We'd rather drop the $75 million now and have a brand new Eastwood High School 4 years from now, because you've got to do it in stages. Why? We don't have anywhere to put the students at Eastwood, but we've got an idea. Let me share it with you. Given the capacity at Eastwood Middle School, I'd like to keep the 8th graders there 1 more year. Keep them there for their 9th grade year. The staff at Eastwood Middle deserve it. I'm just kidding. But keep them there. Why? Because there's over 600 8th grade students. By not sending them over, it creates capacity that then allows us to cordon off parts of Eastwood High School, tear it down, and we would likely have to build a 3-story, maybe even a 4-story high school facility, because part of the objective is to recover as much property, as much land as possible, so that we can reintroduce the softball field to the Eastwood campus, so that we can provide the adequate parking to the Eastwood campus, so that we can take the limited space that we have and still be able to provide them with the kind of experience you should have at a comprehensive high school. And that is access to everything you need on the same campus. Not getting on buses every afternoon or every morning to go find a facility to swim in or play softball in or do any number of things in, to the extent that we can. This is going to be a flagship project. But the reason the investment makes sense is right here. This learning community is at 85% utilization with 1,237 empty seats, K-12. The demographic study does not indicate that we should expect to see any fewer students, any less students 10 years from now. If anything, what we continue to see and what will continually become a challenge is the number of students that continue to come to us and want to attend one of the schools in the Eastwood feeder pattern. And we've been very pliable in allowing people to come, and we've simply kept increasing and increasing the availability of our schools. But at some point, we may have to consider capping the school, because a lot of the students may in fact be coming from our own schools in the district, and that may be creating some of the capacity that we see in the Riverside learning community or in the Del Valle learning community. So open enrollment is here. Open enrollment is here to stay, but in addition to attracting those 6,000 students from outside the district, it also creates an atmosphere, an environment where you have a lot of students moving internally from school to school. And Eastwood happens to be a very popular destination. When we finished reviewing the Jacobs report that helped us arrive at some of these recommendations for Eastwood, it was important to validate the report. Not trying to be indelicate, but just because Jacob says it so doesn't make it so. So what we did was we convened a facilities assessment committee made up of your neighbors, business leaders, parents, community leaders, educators, and for 6 weeks, we put them on yellow school buses and we sent them out to every single one of our schools to look at the condition of our schools in an effort to validate whether what was written in that Jacobs report was reality. Were the schools really that bad? You know what the reaction was from the Facility Assessment Committee when they completed the process? They said, no, it's not that bad. It's worse. The Jacobs report didn't do us justice. Our schools are far worse than what we initially thought. One of the big misconceptions from some of the folks on that Facility Assessment Committee was that, Eastwood, in the Eastwood area, must clearly be paradise. But when they visited and they saw that this school has every bit the same challenges relative to facilities as they have in Riverside and Ysleta and Del Valle, they understood that as a district, we need to reinvest in our facilities. There is no one area in the district that we can look at and say, we're struggling, except for in fill in the blank. We're struggling district-wide. The facility master plan, the proposal that we put before the board, will address the entire district, not any one area. And there certainly won't be any area that's excused from needing an investment. There just simply isn't. There are different conditions relative to the number of students in an area and whether or not it makes sense to invest as much in one area and another, but the investment isn't driven by a nice, uniform, consistent template. There's no intention to invest exactly the same amount of money in each feeder pattern because they all need an investment. They simply don't need the same investment. We have to differentiate based on need. And so when people look at that and say, let me get this right, in the Eastwood feeder pattern, you're proposing an investment of over $100 million, but when I look at Del Valle, you're only going to invest $43 million? Because it's not driven by that kind of parity. It's driven by the need. And Eastwood High School is a very old learning community. But where these people got off track was they were looking at the Jacobs report, but what kept coming up is, wow, look at the gym. Why don't we have this? And why don't we have any artificial surface on any of our stadiums? Why are we the only district in El Paso that hasn't introduced artificial surface to the stadiums? After everything you read about water conservation, the cost associated with maintaining the field, concussions, hip and knee, ankle injuries, all that research, and we still insist on paying $65,000 every year for every field. That's almost $500,000 a year to rebuild the field every year because we overutilize the field and it's in no condition to support student athletes by the spring. That's $500,000 a year to replace our lawn. So we thought, well, they've brought up a lot of good points. But the Facility Assessment Committee's responsibility is to look at the Jacobs report, not to look at what we refer to as amenities. So we put together committees, equity and enhancement. By equity and enhancement, we were interested in two things. First of all, internal equity. Are all kids in this school district having access to the same experience? And the answer is yes. A pretty poor experience in some cases, but everybody's sharing in it. Are they having the same experience as student athletes in Socorro, El Paso, Canutillo? And I think the resounding answer was, we're not sure. We don't think so. We don't think so, because we know that at Socorro, they've got a SAC, that's one big, beautiful stadium with a beautiful artificial surface on it, and then they also have artificial surface on every one of their practice fields. Wait a minute. They have artificial surface on their practice field and we don't have artificial surface on our game field? So this committee, we said, okay, we understand where you're headed, but we're talking about an investment of resources. Artificial surface is not free. Why don't you go out and look at athletic programs in general and come back as if you had a blank check and tell us what it would take to make the Ysleta Independent School District a world-class athletic program. And to do that, of course, they ran out and they looked at all of the examples of what's happening in the area where people are having the benefit of great experiences. Not necessarily all at high schools, but we're not suggesting that we should have a Southwest University ballpark. But it's nice to know that when people go to that ballpark, one of the things that they walk away with, and one of the most quoted statements is that at times it's hard to believe you're still in El Paso because for a long time they didn't think that would become a reality. Now this here is interesting to me. For those of you who have been in the Ysleta Independent School District, how many of you ever thought that you'd be trying to achieve the standard that Clint set? No? Well, we are. They have a beautiful stadium in a beautiful brand new comprehensive high school. And someone could have made the case that there was nothing wrong with your old high school. They're not growing all that much. The old high school could accommodate them. That community decided that may be true. But being adjacent to the Socorro Independent School District and seeing what they're offering their students compels us to want to do right by our students. And so this is the result of that. East Lake High School Gymnasium, anyone who's ever experienced that knows that it is a state-of-the-art high school gymnasium. You'll find very few in any high schools. You'll find very few in any community colleges. There may even be some small universities that don't have a gym like East Lake High School or Pebble Hills High School. The natatorium is something that we've discussed for a long time that we're interested in. Again, I understand that this requires a huge investment in resources. What I'm sharing with you has not been arrived at by the board. The board hasn't made a decision on any of this. They're aware of the interest. We have a chance over the next 2 weeks to make a compelling case to our trustees to give us the opportunity to go out to you and ask for your support. Because the beautiful thing about everything I'm sharing with you is that I don't have the authority or the money to do any of it. The trustees don't have the authority or the money to do any of it. The only people that can make this happen is the voting public. So there's no reason to get upset and stomp and bring up all of the reasons why this is a bad idea. All people need to do is walk down once they've registered to vote and say yes or no. This is an example of pure democracy. I mean, it would be one thing if I had $400 million and I wanted your input on how we should spend it, and I spent it in a way that we didn't agree with, and then all of a sudden there'd be a lot of criticism. Xavier, you're an idiot. How could you possibly spend all that money on that? But in this particular case, I don't have the money. The trustees don't have the money. The question is, does the community believe in what we're trying to do for a new generation of students enough to pay for it? And we'll talk about that in a minute. And if the answer is no, the answer is no. What I tell you at the beginning, the schools belong to you. So they came up with their recommendations, and I'll go through them fast because you're probably familiar with. They want artificial turf, they want big logos in the middle of their stadium, new goalposts, they want scoreboards, lighting, They'd like to see us rebuild some of the gymnasiums and the locker rooms, expand training rooms, upgrade lighting, scoreboard, sound systems, softball, baseball field upgrades. I like this one. Let me tell you about this one. We'd like to be the first and only district, at least at present, that puts lighting on their softball and baseball fields at all 7 of our comprehensive high schools. Why? Because if you're a baseball player or softball player, it's likely that at least twice a week you're being pulled from class. You're losing instructional time because you have to leave at 11:30 to get to the venue and start the game at a time that would allow you to finish the game before it gets dark. And our instructional time should be protected. It should be insulated. Students shouldn't be pulled out at 11 o'clock 3 times a week so that they can finish a ball game. Instead, why don't we light their field and give them something extra? And that extra is this. I played high school baseball. I can count on one hand the number of times that my parents were present at one of my high school baseball games. Why? Because they started at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Because if they didn't start at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun would go down, we wouldn't finish the game, and we simply couldn't have that. And my parents were indelicate. They were insensitive. They were at work instead of coming to watch me. And that's something I still harbor today. No, that's not true. I understand. But wouldn't it be nice if the student athletes in the Ysleta Independent School District could remain in class, get out of school when everybody does, get ready to play a ball game, and then have the benefit of having their mothers and fathers and other special adults in their life be able to attend their ball game and basically give them the same experience that student athletes who participate in football and basketball and some of the other sports get the benefit of. Wouldn't that be nice? Both for baseball players, softball players, why not tennis players? Why not light our tennis courts? Better yet, why not light our tennis courts so our community can enjoy the benefit of our facilities as well? Why not in the summer support our youth baseball programs by allowing them to participate on our fields on hot summer nights? That's what being a community is about. The character of a community, I've come to understand, is about 2 things. 1, how you support your youth, and 2, how you care for your elderly. That's the true character of a community. If you're not doing right by your young or taking care of your old, you lack character. This is an opportunity, in my opinion, to demonstrate that this school district has more character than any other. Remodel tracks in middle schools, centralized indoor-outdoor golf practice facility, and then a big one that we'd like to have a conversation with the board about, of course, is could we find a way to secure the resources to have our own aquatic center, our own natatorium, in our own district, given that the quality of life bond, at least at present, is going to provide a new facility for its citizens on the far west side, and then another on the east side. And I wouldn't begrudge them that. I'm happy that they have access to these facilities, and I suspect that we'd have access to them. But wouldn't it be nice if the Ysleta Independent School District provided its student athletes its own facility? $18 million. $18 million. In addition to that, we had a subcommittee that looked at our visual and performing arts in terms of its facilities. One of the things that has been true about this district is that this district is the only district that currently doesn't have a UIL-rated stage. We want to build a performing arts center. We want to build a performing arts center that can accommodate no less than 1,500 students and could accommodate maybe as many as 2,500 students in a 2-tiered performing arts center with rehearsal rooms and other facilities that would promote the visual and performing arts. In addition to that, we'll continue to invest in all of our visual and performing arts because we think that, coupled with athletics, makes for well-rounded human beings. It's nice to think of our students as completely academic beings, and having intellectual horsepower is certainly important, but to be a well-rounded person, you have to get involved in extra and co-curricular activities, athletics, visual and performing arts, ROTC. All of that is what shapes and forges the students that this school district is charged with serving. And at present, one of our Achilles' heel happened to be our facilities. Technology, there's no way around it. When you have old schools, it makes it very difficult to install, introduce current technologies and emerging technologies. I come from a school district prior to this one where every single classroom had an interactive whiteboard. Every single classroom had a mounted projector, a flat screen television. Technology was part of the curriculum. It was part of the instructional framework. We do everything we can to provide our teachers with those same tools, those same instruments, but they're not part of our facilities and our framework. And they need to be. Because someday that laptop, that digital device will be the same as that pencil and paper was to students from past generations. Someday the backpack will not be carrying 6 or 7 textbooks, you know, the calculus textbook that we used to carry. Well, that's not true. I actually never carried a calculus textbook. But I heard they were heavy. We'll all be on one small device. But the most important thing about technology that I try to impress on parents is this. You cannot continue and limit learning to the hours when school is in session. Learning cannot be from 8 o'clock to 3:30 in this economy. Students have to have access to learning 24/7. Teachers have to have access to their students 24/7. We've got to have campuses where students who come from economically recessed neighborhoods where they may not be able to afford internet access can simply come into the vicinity of their school and be able to access the Wi-Fi with their secure password username and be able to continue to communicate with their teacher and, more importantly, continue to learn. We currently don't have that in place. And at many of our schools, especially those older schools in the Lower Valley, you start drilling around the walls at those schools. As one person once asked me, is there asbestos in your schools? I said, some of our schools are entirely made out of asbestos. They're like gingerbread houses, right? We want to make sure that teachers don't find themselves trying to be innovative and accommodate technology and go in there and start drilling in the walls and the ceilings, because it's the kind of asbestos that, if left uninterrupted, poses absolutely no risk to the children. If you disturb it, it can become a health issue. So even hanging up whiteboards and interactive whiteboards, anything that has to do with changing walls, floors, adding sockets. Prior to coming to the Ysleta Independent School District, I've never walked into a classroom where there was a single plug-in, where there came out one of those little smart bar strips that was hooked up to another bar strip, that was hooked up to another bar strip, and there were 32 computers basically being or attempting to be powered by one socket. That's a fire hazard. That's the kind of thing that our teachers are having to rely on given the circumstances that they find themselves in, and they're trying to do anything and everything they possibly can to give their child, their students, the kind of experience that they could take for granted in other school districts. And I don't think it's time, I don't think it's right that we have to become innovative and creative to do what happens almost automatically in other school districts, simply by virtue of growing up in one particular zip code. All right, I'm going to move on because I know we have performances. If you want additional information, you can fill out a card or email me, and I've been very good about being responsive to all the questions. But here's something I really think is important for all of us to understand. All right? So here's the truth. There are a number of things that happen in the city that do, I think, cause a tax burden on our senior citizens. The one that does not is any increase to the property tax rate that is tied to supporting schools. But a lot of our senior citizens don't know that, and it's our job to make them aware of that. And that's relatively straightforward. Here's what's not straightforward. Here's what I'd like you to really think about. This is what's not straightforward. This is a misconception, one that I even had next door when I was the superintendent, and that is that the Ysleta Independent School District has the highest tax rate in El Paso County. And I see some of you nodding, and you're right. It has the highest tax rate in El Paso County. It's $1.36, by the way, not $1.46, but there's a reason for that $1.46. The highest tax rate. It also has the highest local homestead exemption, not in the county, in the state. before you begin to calculate how much your home is valued for the purpose of paying taxes to support your school system, in this school district, we'd like you to take 20% off the value, the appraised value of your home. That's huge. If you live in a $400,000 home, that means you'd be taxed at $320,000. If you live in a $100,000 home, that means you're going to be taxed at $80,000. But wait, the state also guarantees you an exemption. That's this 15 in this scenario. So in this scenario, you've got Socorro Independent School District, the El Paso Independent School District. They both have tax rates that appear to be on the surface much lower than the $1.36 that we currently charge. And you know what? It doesn't matter. When you're being taxed at $85,000 in Socorro and in El Paso, but being taxed $65,000 or on a $65,000 home in Ysleta, you can't make up the difference with a tax rate. That tax rate right there is 20 cents higher than this tax rate, and the person in the Ysleta Independent School District is still paying less than both the taxpayer in Socorro and the taxpayer in El Paso. It is very difficult to make up this 20%. This $1.46 right now that you see right there, that represents a 10-cent increase on your current tax rate. Our current tax rate is actually $1.36. The reason I put $1.46 is because if we increased your tax rate by 10 cents, most of you would have a reaction. You'd assume that it's outrageous. This is crazy. They just increased the property tax rate by 10 cents for every $100 of home value. Crooks. Crooks. And yet, the reality is that those 10 cents, while they may have secured almost $400 million for this school district, still didn't get this taxpayer up to where the Socorro or the El Paso Independent School District taxpayer is at. Taxpayers in this district, and I'm not being cavalier about this, but it's true. Taxpayers in this district have paid far less for a far better public school system than anyone else in El Paso. You're getting a lot more for your money than they get in other school districts, in my opinion. And those 10 cents would provide these students, as I said before, almost a $400 million increase so that we could invest in some of the things that we just discussed. And again, it would take 24 cents, almost a quarter. We'd have to increase the tax rate by 25 cents to be able to reach parity with what they pay in El Paso and Socorro. So we talk sometimes and people say, don't increase the taxes. I get it. I understand. Everybody's economic situation is their own. I'm not trying to be cavalier. 3, 4 cents. But the reality is for decades, this district has had the benefit of that homestead exemption. Now, people say, well, why don't you get rid of the homestead exemption? Well, because I don't want torches coming up my street. It's that simple. That homestead exemption has been around so long that people have come to feel entitled to it and expect it. And I understand that, and they should. So that homestead exemption is not likely to ever go away. What we'll have to do, though, is think about, do we compensate for such a great bargain by being a little supportive of an increase, whatever that may ultimately be, in an effort to support a new generation of students who are attending schools that have been around for 100 years in some cases, but in most cases for at least 40 years. That's the question. That's the purpose for the conversation tonight. Take a look at this. If you have a moment and you're curious, and some of you may be, put that in your browser and see what comes up. If you put that in your browser, there will be a calculator. If you drop in your current property value, or what you believe it to be, right? And some of you may be actually in the middle of challenging what the Central Appraisal District has suggested the value of your home is. But use the one you know that the Central Appraisal District uses. And what you'll find is you'll find what's called a YISD estimated property tax calculator. That if you put in the current value of your home right there, it will tell you how you compare to EPISD and SISD in terms of annual taxes and monthly taxes for someone that lives in a home that is of the same value your home is. So we used $150,000 as home value. Assuming that the homeowner in the El Paso Independent School District also has a home valued at $150,000, they will pay $1,674, or about $139 a month. In Socorro, they will pay $1,714 to their school, or about $142 a month. Currently, at $1.36, you will pay $1,428, about $300 less than they pay a year, or $119 a month, about $22 less than they pay a month. And even after we increase your tax by 10% under this hypothetical example, you would still pay less. After 10-cent increase, you would still pay less in this district than they currently pay in the neighboring school districts of $1,700 and $1,600. You would be at $127 a month, while they're at $142 and $139. And this is available on our website if you'd like to look at it. So we're talking about significant investments and improvements in our school district that automatically cause a reaction or the assumption that, boy, this is going to cost me a ton of money. For most people, for this person, what it cost him was he went from $119 a month to $127 a month, or $9 more a month, while securing $400 million for their students. I'll end with that, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is it on? Thank you, sir, for your presentation. I am a parent of 2 students at Eastwood Knowles. I heard you speak a lot about the plans for academics. Although I feel it's important, I would like to know more about, you mentioned a lot about athletics, but I want to know more about academics. What are the plans for math, science labs, math labs? We need our students to be able to compete at a much higher level than they do now in those areas.
I think you're right, and that's what I was referring to when I said that we need to take our current classroom structure and we need to introduce 21st century learning environments. Those are those environments that are rich in current and emerging technologies. So in that Jacobs report, part of what is included in that investment at Eastwood Knowles, and I think it was a $4.5 million investment, is the transformation of classes, the upgrade, renovation of classes to accommodate a greater rigor of learning in the classroom. But ultimately, the thing that makes the biggest difference in terms of preparing students for the kind of rigor and the kind of complexities that they'll find in their future is the quality of the teacher in the classroom. And so in addition to making an investment in the classroom, this district is committed to finding resources to invest in helping teachers improve in their craft, develop in their craft. It's all about the man in the arena, but it certainly helps when they have the vehicles and the tools to engage students who I think we all know are digital learners and who are attracted to, intuitively, technology. Yes, ma'am, or sir.
Yes, I came down, wasn't able to attend your Hanks meeting last week. I checked with your PIO office. I understand after tomorrow's meeting, this will be on the school's website. Questions. Now, on any campus that might be closed or campuses, what will happen to those properties? Do they have marketable value? If somebody says it's worth so much, what will be the degree of marketability? And also, the city, the county, UMC, MPO, Texas Tech, many of those governmental entities rent space and facilities on the economy. Is there any possibility of working with them And where they're renting space, some of that could come down on our campuses. So basically, you don't have level earth. Thank you.
Yes, sir. In every case where we're considering closing a school, or in a situation where a school might be left vacant on a property, the first thing we want to do is we want to be respectful to the neighborhood. And we realize that if we leave a school vacant and unattended in anybody's neighborhood, that it's going to be subject to vandalism, graffitiing, and all other types of nefarious behavior in the facility. So one of the things that we have to determine almost immediately is whether or not we repurpose the building for another function within the district, or whether or not it makes sense to level the building and sell the property to offset the debt. So we've got some schools that we're considering that are located in areas where we think are attractive for commercial. But just as importantly, we've got some properties that could really promote the idea of increased single-family homes or multifamily homes, because you get a double benefit from that. You get the sale of the land, and then if they build single-family homes or multifamily homes, you get the tax revenue from the people that move into those homes, and that includes the increase in enrollment at schools that support that area, so it's a win-win for everybody. But we are reaching out to government agencies, El Paso Workforce, some Pride Industries, to see whether or not there would be any interest in either buying or leasing or renting some of the schools that could become vacant if the plan moves forward. You're welcome, sir.
I was wondering if, as a student here, if you were rebuilding Eastwood, the sophomores through seniors, where would they go for school? Like, would they be on this campus still, or would they be going to another
The
high
idea
school?
would be that if at all possible, we would try and leave them here as to not interrupt their education. But by leaving the 9th grade students at Eastwood Middle School, we would hope that it would create the availability of anywhere between 25 and 30 classrooms that could be vacant, and that we could tear down and rebuild, and then the following stage would have students move into those brand new classrooms, and we'd identify another set of classrooms. So it'd be done in stages over a 3-4 year period. The only other option, and what's been done to some extent in large school districts like Houston, where they've renovated and rebuilt almost 100 high schools, is they take the current and existing stadium and athletic fields, and it becomes a portable classroom city. And you put everybody out there, you knock the entire school down, and it accelerates the construction, but with the inconvenience of putting students in portable classrooms, and then the added inconvenience of having to put students on buses to go to practice and games and all of the other extracurricular activities that they get involved in. One of them is respectful of time, but can accrue costs because it extends or creates an extended timeline for the school to be complete, and there are costs associated with that called escalation. The other one allows you to finish the school much quicker, and ultimately you may save money, but then you have to spend the money on the portable. So all of that has to be really analyzed to come up with the best scenario. And at present, I think we're considering the stage methodology rather than the tent city or portable city. That's a great question. Thank you.
A question for you is, sorry about that, is I've noticed that a lot of art teachers as well as music teachers are going to 3 different schools instead of being in one direct school. So a question I've asked for you is, are you going to change that for next year to where now where someone's going to get a job, they're going to stay in that same school? Or are they going to keep on moving from 3, they're jumping from one school to another school to another school, and the students are not really getting the full potential that they possibly can?
That's what I referred to as one of the benefits of creating larger middle schools, in that when you have a small middle school, your art classes, your elective classes may be not only small in enrollment, they may be too few sections, right? And so a teacher in this district is asked to teach, I believe, 6 sections. It may even be 7 sections when it's in an elective class. If you consolidate the middle schools, now all of a sudden that teacher has a better chance of finding enough students to stay at that one larger middle school than being asked to continue to move around the district so that they can fulfill their contractual obligation to teach 6 sections. Good question. Yes, ma'am.
The high school students that are playing on sports like soccer and everything on turf, that they've been finding they're getting cancer, and they think it's because of the recycled tires used to make the turf.
Yeah, we read that, and there are some turfs that they're looking into. I don't think there's anything conclusive yet where the fibers that are used to create the soft cushion, the padding, if inhaled, can have a similar effect to what asbestos does in the lungs. However, we will make sure that when we work with the companies that will ultimately provide the surface, that the materials that they are using are materials that aren't in that category. So it really depends on the level of investment. When you work with reputable dealers, the same dealers that are currently providing the surface for, the Dallas Cowboys and some of the professional teams, it's unlikely that they're using any materials that could be deemed harmful, or else the NFL and many other organizations would likely be filing lawsuits at present. If you go really economical and you buy from someone that's not a reputable dealer, there is that possibility, and we simply won't take that chance. They're currently working on some kind of an identifier, a sticker or an emblem or something that would indicate that the field has been analyzed and that it's been deemed safe for use.
Sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir.
Are we taking cuts? Well, I'll be back to you.
Hi, I just have
Hi.
a quick question. If this idea were to be voted in by the community, what is the timeline as far as starting?
So one of the things that we're doing different this time than we've done in the past is because of the comprehensive nature and the complexity of this project, we're not comfortable as a school system managing all of these projects. So in this particular case, we're going to go with a common practice referred to as a program manager or a construction manager at risk, but certainly a program manager that doesn't do this every 10 years or every 15 years, but that does it every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and who will serve as a representative of the district when working with architects, engineers, contractors, and subcontractors to make sure that the project is within budget, on time, and of the quality that we want to have in this district for our students. Because one of the things that a lot of people don't know, a lot of the schools that are being considered for renovation and replacement aren't necessarily the oldest schools in the district. There was a period of time in the 80s and 90s when it appears that what was being used or the methodology to construct some of our schools was inadequate and did not take into consideration the soil conditions in El Paso, and so we've had a lot of problems related to structure and schools that are sinking that may be only 10, 15 years old. That's unacceptable. Having a program manager that is an expert in this area, I think will insulate this district from ever having to go through that experience again.
Once this is accepted or maybe presented as the bond, and those parents that are hoping it does go through, what's going to happen if it doesn't pass? How are we going to get the money to put back into the schools? Because something
no
has
plan
to be
B.
done. What will happen? Nothing?
No plan B.
Nothing will be
We
done.
only know one way. No, what would have to happen is
This way or nothing, right?
I can't allow myself to think that way.
I know,
Now,
but
now the
we have
reason
to
I
be
can be
realistic.
enthusiastic and somewhat dramatic and emotional is because there has been no bond called. One of the things that is true of a bond measure is that the minute the bond is called, as an official of the district, as a public servant, I can no longer present in an animated way. So I'm trying to get it all out now, because the district is responsible to provide due diligence, but it cannot do anything that would be misconstrued as trying to or attempting to influence, coerce a voter to vote one way or the other. Now, the one thing I will tell you is that this community could do better in terms of getting involved in the democratic process. It's anticipated that in May of 2015, if we're lucky, 3% of registered voters will participate. And if we're not lucky, 1% will participate. And one of the biggest misconceptions is that educators, teachers, administrators, counselors, nurses, and so on, can either make or break a bond measure. And that's true, except that only 1 in 5 educators actually register to vote, and only 1 in 10 of the 5, or of the one that does register vote, will actually ever vote. So it can happen. Mathematically, you have to understand that school districts in many communities are the largest employer. They have the greatest influence. It's not just the employee in a school district, but it's the employee's family. They typically have great relationship with the students and their families, who also have families, right? And yet, not enough of us register to vote to make the inevitable happen. And I've been told by experts that it doesn't matter how many times I bring that up, that at the end of this election, if I go and I look at the number of people that participated, it will still be 1 in 5, no matter how many times I tell teachers this. And keep in mind, my system is one of, when I'm done here, I present tomorrow at Riverside. And then after that, I go to 63 schools over the next 3 months, every morning and every afternoon, and we talk about this, except that we reduce it down to what it's going to do for their school, their work environment, their students, and then at the end I remind them that it's super, that you're all excited and that you support this, but how many of you are registered to vote? And typically in a faculty room, I will get 5 or 6 people. And I can say the rest of you need to go out and vote. What I can't say is you all need to go out and vote so that you can support the bond. That cannot ever be said. That's up to them. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Great question. The number one question typically is, what happens to the teachers when you consolidate a school? What happens to the custodians? The answer is, we staff schools based on enrollment. So enrollment drives the number of full-time equivalents. That's the number of positions. When you move 300 children from Hillcrest over and consolidate them with Ranchland Hills will not have the faculty to accommodate those 300 children, so the teachers have to come with them. The custodians have to come with them because all of a sudden, cleaning up for 400 students becomes cleaning up for 800 students. The nurse has to come. The librarian has to come. Now, nurses, librarians, principal, it's true. You only need one. But keep in mind that every year, over 200 people leave this district. They retire, they resign, they relocate, they promote. All you need to do is be thoughtful, deliberate, and plan. And there will be more than enough vacancies to accommodate every principal, nurse, head custodian, librarian, the positions that I call singletons. Singleton's a term we used to reserve, I think, for master scheduling. But we also reserve it for those positions where you only need one principal. Assistant principal formulas are driven by students as well. So if you add 300 students, it's likely that the assistant principals have to come with them. The final thing that I would tell you, from my lips to God's ears, is that the one thing the board said was there can be no adverse impact on personnel in this facility master plan. No one can lose their job or see their hours reduced because we're reinventing the district. And that's a commitment that's easy to keep. Yes, sir. May 2015.
How will that be? I don't need that, I don't think. How will that be on the, well, we're talking about the election in May. How will that be organized on the ballot? Are you going to lump it all in one package? You are.
No.
Why not break it down so that different sectors, we can vote on it on an individual basis instead of grouping it accordingly?
Yes, that's a very good question. There are some districts that put it all as an all or nothing, a big package. We're trying to pass a bond measure for $511 million. It's yes or no. And in that bond measure, you have everything that I described up here. There are other districts that like the idea of doing the absolutely mission critical, the mechanical panels, the electrical panels, the fire, the wall. But then they think, let the public decide whether or not they'd like a natatorium. That would be a B. C would be, let the public decide if they'd like a sports activity complex. And you break it down. My experience, and this is my fourth bond, and I'm 3-0, is you go for what you go for. Because what will end up happening is I think people will get confused. Having said that, it isn't my decision. The board will certainly be made aware of the methodology that this gentleman just described, as well as my experience with just being thoughtful about what I believe the district may be willing to support and what may be excessive and have to be considered as part of a second phase or a second cycle of facilities bond. But that's a good question. Thank you. Okay? Right. That's the beautiful thing here is that, ultimately it's up to the parents and the voters. Like I said, we don't have the money. If it doesn't work out, in all honesty and in all seriousness, I regroup my team. I have an outstanding team. I've had a very supportive board. We look at the data. We decide whether or not maybe it was too excessive, we were expecting too much. We trim it down, and we come back. And the reason we come back in November and we come back the following May, and I'll come back again in November after that, is because the schools aren't getting any better. We're not solving the problem, and we're certainly not going to ignore the problem, right? And so we'll keep coming back until we find a solution. That was clear to me. That was the work in this school district. Change the trajectory of this school district forever. Let's get it headed in the right direction. Let's get families and students back into the Ysleta Independent School District so that they can have the benefit of the kind of teachers that our students currently have the benefit of being in and around.
I was going to ask.
No, Des did not catch that ball.
They said he caught it, but it wasn't possession, is what they said. So New York said. I was going to ask, so with building the new schools, what you guys are planning on doing, you think that's going to bring more students to the Ysleta Independent School District?
I think the schools are part of it. I think that the additional amenities like the artificial surface on fields, but I think ultimately what will bring the students is what we've charged each of our principals with, and that is you need to come up with creative and innovative programs. Let me give you an example of one that we're working on. I don't like to put it out there because other superintendents, they like to take my ideas. I'm just kidding. When we consolidate Hillcrest and Ranchland Hills and we build them a new Bel Air Middle School, I want to take Hillcrest and I want to introduce the first single-gender academy, an all-girls school. It'll be called Young Women's Leadership Academy. It'll be grades 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 100 young ladies every grade level with a STEM emphasis, STEM meaning science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and a priority of getting more schools to pursue the field of science and technology with a high application and acceptance rate to colleges and universities. Now you tell me in a community like El Paso, whether fathers like me, the father of 5 children, 4 girls, one's 23, the other one's 16, one's 14, one's 9, and I have a 7-year-old son, would not see the benefit of putting my girls in an all-girls, young ladies leadership academy. They'll knock the door down. They'll knock the door down. It's that kind of a program or programs like that we need to start getting together and developing in our school district that will attract the students. The facilities will help, but I think the facilities will help keep the students we have more than they will attract the students because the districts around us also have those facilities. But it's keeping the ones we have who are being tempted to go and go to this school district because they happen to have this brand new beautiful weight room and a beautiful... It's what happens with colleges and universities when these young athletes decide where they'd like to go to school. There's a reason a lot of people go to the University of Oregon. And it isn't because Mr. Pearson was a standout athlete there, although I'm sure that helps. But it's because Nike makes the experience extraordinary and remarkable. And that's what we need to do in some of our schools, to keep not only the students we have now, but to attract students back whose families had the benefit of this district a decade ago. Thank you all very much. I really appreciate it.